August 2015. Two guys walk into a law office in Poland carrying a map. They've got a story. They found something. A Nazi train, hidden in a mountain tunnel since 1945. 300 tons of gold, jewels, art, worth billions. And here's the thing. The Polish government actually takes them seriously. They send out ground-penetrating radar teams. The news goes viral. Treasure hunters start showing up in this tiny village called Wałbrzych. Journalists are filming empty hillsides, waiting for something to happen. And then you start digging into the story. Not literally digging, just researching. And you find things. Not the train. Something weirder. Bank records from 1945 with transfers that make no sense. Testimonies from dying SS officers that completely contradict each other. And then you notice a pattern. This isn't the first Nazi gold train story. It's the seventh. So here's the question nobody seems to be asking. What if the conspiracy isn't that the train exists? What if the conspiracy is that it doesn't? What if someone needed you looking in the wrong place? Let me take you back. May 8th, 1945. Nazi Germany surrenders. The Reich is falling apart. But something weird happens in those final weeks. Trains, lots of them, moving east from Berlin, south from Munich, west from Prague. What were they carrying? Nobody knows for sure. But we have manifests. Partial ones, anyway. Train DA 4719 from Breslau. 48 crates. Contents classified. Destination unknown. It never arrived. Train KL 889 from Auschwitz. Gold dental fillings. Estimated at 17 tons. Last seen April 18th heading toward Wałbrzych. Then there's one classified as Führer Sonderzug. Art stolen from Polish museums. 300 paintings including 2 Rembrandts. It disappeared March 30th, 1945. These aren't just rumors. These are documented Nazi records that Allied forces recovered. The trains existed. The cargo existed. The trains disappeared. Now here's where things get strange. The Nazis built this massive underground complex in the Alp Mountains near Wałbrzych. Code name, Riese. It means giant in German. Construction started in 1943 using forced labor from concentration camps. Tens of thousands of people died building it. We're talking about a complex that covers 35 square kilometers, 7 separate tunnel systems. Some tunnels are fully finished, reinforced concrete, lighting, the works. Others are half complete, just abandoned mid-construction. The Nazis never officially said what Riese was for. People have theories. Nuclear weapons research, underground factories, maybe Hitler's eastern headquarters, or just strategic storage. What we know is they spent the equivalent of $150,001,945 building these tunnels. We know they evacuated everyone in April 1945 and sealed some entrances with explosives. And we know that when Soviet forces showed up in May, the tunnels were completely empty. Whatever had been there was gone. But somebody saw something. January 1946. There's this Polish railway worker named Niklaus Czerski who gives testimony to the provisional government. He'd been forced to work on track maintenance in the Alp Mountains back in April 1945. He describes SS guards forcing workers to lay temporary rail lines into a tunnel entrance near Ksayas Castle. He watches a train go in. Steam locomotive, 11 cars, all covered in camouflage netting. The train goes in. The train doesn't come out. 3 days later, SS engineers blow up the entrance. The tunnel collapses. The workers are told they'll be shot if they say anything. Most of those workers are dead by 1946. Disease, starvation, execution. Czerski survives. His testimony gets filed away, and then forgotten. The Polish government has bigger problems. Reconstruction, Soviet occupation. A train in a mountain doesn't really matter when your cities are rubble. Fast forward to 1972. This German guy named Heinrich Hartmann is dying in a hospital in Augsburg. He calls a priest because he wants to confess something. He was an SS officer stationed at Ksayas Castle in April 1945. He supervised the loading of a train, gold bars from Reichsbank reserves, artwork from occupied territories, jewels taken from Auschwitz victims. The train was sealed. Hartmann personally watched it enter a tunnel. He personally set the demolition charges. The priest takes notes. Hartmann describes the exact location. The priest contacts German authorities who contact Polish authorities. The Polish government sends a team, and they find the collapsed tunnel entrance exactly where Hartmann said it would be. But they also find something else. The tunnel had been dug deeper after the collapse. Someone excavated about 40 meters past the 1945 collapse point, then refilled it. Based on soil analysis, this excavation happened sometime between 1946 and 1950. Whoever was digging either stopped before reaching whatever might be further in, or they found something and covered up the evidence. The Polish government classifies the investigation. Cold War paranoia, Soviet pressure. The file disappears into the archives. Let me explain how this worked. When the Nazis knew they were losing, they had three priorities. First, save Nazi leadership. Get Hitler's inner circle out or hidden. Second, preserve the ideology. Move documents, research true believers to safe locations. Third, save the wealth. Not just gold bars, everything valuable that could rebuild the Reich someday. Art, jewels, currency, patents, bearer bonds. The Nazis were obsessive record keepers until those final months. Then the records get fuzzy, and I think it was intentional. They created ghost trains, real manifests for fake cargo, fake manifests for real cargo, multiple testimonies about the same train being in different locations, coded references that meant something to insiders but looked like gibberish to everyone else. Why? Because they knew the Allies would capture their records. They knew their own people would talk under interrogation, so they created noise. They flooded the system with contradictory information, made it impossible to know what was real. And it worked. Between 1945 and 1949, Allied forces followed up on 217 separate reports of hidden Nazi treasure trains. They found 31 of them. Most contained industrial equipment, military supplies, or documents. 11 trains had actual valuables, gold dental fillings from the camps, looted art, currency reserves. But here's the problem. The math doesn't add up. The Reichsbank alone held 281 tons of gold in January 1945. The Allies recovered 89 tons. The Soviet Union claimed they recovered 94 tons, but their documentation is sketchy at best. That leaves about 98 tons unaccounted for. And that's just from the Reichsbank. Add in gold reserves from occupied territories. Add in privately looted wealth. Add in art and jewels. Conservative estimates put missing Nazi assets at over $3 billion in 1945 dollars. Adjusted for today, that's $47 billion. Minimum. So where did it go? The story splits here into two paths. Path 1, it was found quietly. Swiss banks, South American transfers, Vatican connections. The wealth was laundered, dispersed, used to fund escape networks for Nazi officers. And there's substantial evidence for this. We have bank records showing suspicious deposits in Argentina from 1946 to 1952. We have testimony from Nazi hunters describing a sophisticated financial network. We have artwork showing up in private collections decades later. This is the boring answer. The treasure was found, stolen quietly, and spent over decades. No train in a tunnel, just paperwork and corruption. Path 2, it's still there. The Nazis hid it too well. The people who knew the locations died without talking. The tunnels are too deep, too complex, too dangerous to fully explore. This is the romantic answer. The treasure is still out there, waiting, and people believe it. They believe it enough to spend their own money looking. They believe it enough that when two guys claimed they found it with ground-penetrating radar in 2015, international media covered the story for weeks. So let's talk about those two guys. August 2015. Andreas Richter, who's German, and Piotr Koper, who's Polish. They hire a lawyer and make an announcement. They found a 150-meter-long train using ground-penetrating radar near Volbjik. The train appears to be in a tunnel about 70 meters underground. They want a 10% finder's fee from the Polish government before they'll reveal the exact location. The Polish government responds pretty carefully. Deputy Culture Minister Piotr Zukowski says the radar images are compelling enough to justify an investigation. He estimates there's a 99% chance there's actually a train there. Treasure hunters start arriving. The area turns into a complete circus. Security has to keep people from just digging randomly. December 2015. The Polish military brings in professional ground-penetrating radar teams. They scan the site. The results are definitive. There is no train. What Richter and Koper's amateur equipment picked up was probably a natural geological formation or maybe the remains of an old industrial structure, but definitely not a 150-meter Nazi train. The story should end there. But it doesn't, because Richter and Koper insist their original scans were correct. They claim the military is lying. They claim the government found the train and is covering it up. They claim there's a conspiracy to deny them their finder's fee. And people believe them. Why? Because this pattern has repeated before. 1987, a guy named Matthias Huber claims he found documents proving the location of a Nazi train near the Austrian border. He raises money for excavation. He digs. He finds nothing. But he insists the train was moved by authorities before he got there. 2001. A team in Bavaria excavates based on a deathbed confession from a former Nazi officer. They find a tunnel. They find evidence of recent disturbance. But no train. They claim someone got there first. 2009. Ground-penetrating radar detects a large metal object near Düsseldorf. Excavation finds a buried steam locomotive. But it's not Nazi. It's from the 1920s, dumped there during the Cold War. Each failed search doesn't discourage believers. It just confirms the conspiracy. Someone is always there first. And this is still happening. Summer 2024. New ground-penetrating radar technology detects anomalies in 3 separate locations in the Owl Mountains. Private investors are funding new expeditions. Polish authorities are granting permits. The search continues. But here's what nobody seems to ask. Why are we still looking? The Nazis have been gone for 79 years. Even if there was gold in a tunnel in 1945, why would it still be there in 2024? If you knew where 300 tons of gold was buried, wouldn't you have dug it up by 1950? By 1960? Certainly by 2000, when deep excavation became routine? Let me show you a different pattern. The Volgic region is economically depressed. Unemployment is at 14%. Average monthly income is below the national average. Tourism is limited. But every time there's a Nazi train story, tourists show up. Hotels fill up. Restaurants make money. According to local government analysis, media attention generates an estimated 2.1 million euros in economic impact per search attempt. The 2015 search brought international journalists to a town nobody had ever heard of. Local museums reported a 340% increase in visitors. The Nazi train isn't treasure. The Nazi train is an industry. As long as people keep looking, money keeps flowing in. But there's something else happening in those tunnels. The Riese complex is real. The tunnels are real. And researchers have been quietly exploring them for decades. Not treasure hunters, but historians, archaeologists, geologists. What they're finding isn't gold. They're finding evidence of what the Nazis were actually doing there. Documents left behind. Industrial equipment. Radiation signatures consistent with uranium or processing. Chemical residue from explosives manufacturing. The tunnels weren't treasure vaults. They were workshops, research facilities. The Nazis were building weapons, not storing loot. The treasure story might have been deliberate misdirection. Keep people looking for gold so they don't ask about the nuclear research, the chemical weapons, the mass graves from forced labor. There are 286 documented forced laborers who died in the Riese complex. We have their names. Some of them. The real number is probably in the thousands. Most bodies were never recovered. The tunnels are their tomb. And while treasure hunters are scanning for metal, forensic teams are still identifying remains. The last identification was in March 2024, a Jewish prisoner from Czechoslovakia. He was 19 years old when he died building the tunnel system. His name was David Bergman. He has living relatives in Israel who didn't know what happened to him until this year. That's what's actually in those mountains. Not gold. Ghosts. So what's the truth? There probably were trains. There probably was treasure. Some of it was recovered. Some of it was stolen. Some of it was laundered. Maybe some of it is still there. But the exact location of specific trains? The precise contents of specific caches? After 79 years of deliberately obscured records, Cold War interference, professional looting, and amateur treasure hunting, the truth is just archaeological static. We can't know. We probably won't ever know. And the conspiracy theory has become more valuable than any actual treasure could be. Because here's the final irony. The people who spend their lives searching for Nazi gold trains aren't getting rich. Andreas Richter and Piotr Koper spent their life savings on the 2015 search. They're in debt. They're mocked internationally. But the Volgic Tourism Board? The documentary producers? The metal detector companies? The ground-penetrating radar equipment manufacturers? They're profiting. The hunt for Nazi gold has generated an estimated 28 million euros in economic activity since 2000. The treasure everyone's looking for is the search itself. But here's what haunts me. Let's say you're right. Let's say tomorrow someone actually finds a train, 300 tons of gold, art worth billions. What happens then? Who owns it? The Polish government claims sovereignty. The German government claims historical ownership. Jewish organizations claim restitution for Holocaust victims. Individual families claim specific pieces of looted art. International courts could be litigating this for decades. Meanwhile, the gold sits in a warehouse, frozen by legal claims. Nobody wins. The treasure becomes a curse, just like it was always meant to be. The Nazis knew they were losing. They knew their wealth would be claimed by the victors. So maybe the final act of defiance wasn't hiding the treasure. Maybe it was making sure nobody could ever fully claim it. Create enough confusion, enough contradictory evidence, enough ghost trains and false leads. Turn the recovery into decades of legal warfare. Make sure the hunt costs more than the prize. If you can't keep it, make sure nobody else can either. That's the real pattern here. Not lost Nazi trains. Weaponized ambiguity. And we're still falling for it 79 years later. The Nazi gold train isn't a mystery to be solved. It's a trap to be recognized. Every year we spend searching is a year we're not processing, not healing, not learning. The treasure hunt has become the point. The Nazis are gone, but we're still doing their work. We're still obsessing over their gold instead of remembering their victims. We're still digging in their tunnels instead of teaching about their crimes. So maybe the question isn't, where's the train? Maybe the question is, why are we still looking? What does it say that in 2024, we have more ground-penetrating radar teams scanning for Nazi gold than we have forensic teams identifying Nazi victims? We know the names of the treasure hunters. Do we know the names of the forced laborers? We have detailed maps of tunnel systems for treasure searches. Do we have detailed records of who built those tunnels and where they're buried? The Nazi gold train is both myth and history. The trains existed. The treasure existed. The mystery is real. But the obsession is a choice. And that choice reveals something uncomfortable. We're more interested in the wealth they stole than the people they murdered. We're more invested in finding their treasure than understanding their crimes. And maybe that's the real treasure they left behind. Not gold in a tunnel. The guarantee that we'd rather chase fantasy than face reality. That we'd rather dig for bars of metal than dig for truth. They lost the war, but they knew how to keep us digging forever.